Miran always liked quiet corners. While other people spent their evenings in busy streets and bright shops, he often wandered in places where few footsteps fell. On one cloudy afternoon, his path took him down an old alley he had never noticed before. The walls were tall and cracked, and ivy grew across the bricks like soft green fingers. At the end of the alley stood a heavy wooden door, half hidden by vines. Something about it called to him. He pushed gently. The door creaked open, releasing a faint breath of cool air mixed with the scent of dust and paper. Inside, a staircase led downward into darkness. Miran hesitated, but his curiosity was stronger. He pulled a small lantern from his bag. He always carried one on his walks and stepped inside. The stairs were long, winding down deeper than he expected. At the bottom, he entered a vast hall. His lantern's light fell across endless shelves reaching up into shadows. Books, scrolls, and crystal tablets lined the walls. The air hummed softly, as if the place itself was alive. He had found a library, but not like any he had ever seen. Miran walked between the tall shelves, touching the edges of books that seemed older than his world. Some covers were written in languages he did not recognize. Others glowed faintly, whispering when he brushed against them. His steps echoed, but beneath the sound, he felt something else, something that was not his own movement. It was the sense of being watched. He stopped and turned, but no one stood behind him. Only shadows stretched across the floor. Still, the feeling lingered. He smiled faintly to himself. Perhaps the books are alive, he whispered, trying to ease the unease. Yet his heart beat faster as he moved deeper. The central chamber was wide and domed, with a ceiling painted in faded stars. In the middle stood a stone table scattered with open scrolls. Miran bent to look closer. The symbols danced before his eyes, glowing softly. Though he could not read them, they gave him the strange feeling of stories long forgotten. Then, from the corner of his vision, he saw movement. A shadow slipped between two shelves. He straightened at once, holding his lantern higher. "Hello." His voice trembled, but he forced calm into it. No answer came. The silence pressed heavy, but the sense of presence grew stronger. Instead of fear, curiosity pushed him forward. He had always believed hidden places carried secrets worth discovering. Whoever or whatever was here, it was not harming him. He walked slowly, following the faint sound of movement. Each time he neared, the shadow withdrew, as if shy. At last, Miran stopped chasing. Instead, he returned to the stone table and sat upon its edge. He placed his lantern beside him and spoke into the silence. "I do not mean harm. If you are here, you do not need to hide." His words echoed, soft and calm. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, a gentle rustle came, like fabric brushing stone. A presence lingered at the edge of the chamber, though it remained unseen. Miran smiled faintly. "I will come again tomorrow. Maybe then, you will show yourself." He closed one of the scrolls with care and placed it neatly back on the table. Standing, he gave a small bow to the unseen watcher, as if showing respect to a host. Then he turned and walked back toward the stairway. The feeling of eyes on his back followed him until he reached the door above. When he stepped out into the alley, the heavy door closed behind him with a soft thud, as though the library itself wished to remain hidden. Outside, the world felt brighter, almost ordinary again. Yet Miran knew his life had changed. A secret place had revealed itself, and something or someone waited in the shadows below. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought not of the busy streets or the loud markets. His mind returned again and again to the endless shelves, the whispering books, and the shadow that lingered just out of sight. He felt no fear, only a strange warmth of expectation. For the first time in many years, he longed for tomorrow to arrive quickly. The next evening, Miran returned to the hidden alley. All day he had felt restless, his thoughts drifting back to the shadowed shelves and the unseen presence that had followed him. The door was still there, covered with vines as though it had been waiting quietly for centuries. He pushed it open and felt again that cool breath of air rising from below. Carrying his lantern, he descended the winding stairs. The library greeted him in silence, the air thick with the smell of old paper and faint crystal light. He walked slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness. Deep inside, in the domed chamber, the stone table stood as he had left it. He placed his lantern down, then opened his bag. Inside, he had brought something: an old notebook and a small carved wooden bird. He set them gently on the table. "These are gifts," he said softly, though he did not know if anyone was listening. "The notebook is empty, for writing new things. The bird is from my grandfather. He carved it when I was small. I want to share it with you." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, at the far edge of the chamber, he heard the faintest sound, like a sigh carried on the air. Miran turned his head but did not rise or chase. Instead, he simply smiled. Day after day, he returned. Each time, he brought something new: a folded paper star, a poem he had written, a small flower pressed between the pages of a book. He always spoke kindly, leaving the gifts on the stone table before reading quietly from whatever scrolls or books caught his eye. And each time, the presence grew stronger. The shadow no longer fled entirely. Sometimes he caught a glimpse, the shape of a slender figure slipping behind a shelf, a faint shimmer in the corner of his lantern light. On the seventh visit, Miran finally heard a voice. It was soft, almost uncertain. "Why, do you come?" He froze, heart pounding. Slowly, he turned toward the shelves where the voice had come from. "Because this place is beautiful," he answered. "And because I feel you are here. I don't want you to be alone." There was a pause. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. She was unlike anyone Miran had seen. Her form was tall and graceful, her hair falling like silver threads that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Her eyes glowed softly, filled with both caution and sorrow. She wore robes that seemed woven from the night itself. Miran did not move closer, afraid that any sudden action might make her retreat. Instead, he bowed his head slightly, as if greeting a friend. "I am Miran," he said quietly. "May I know your name?" The figure hesitated, then spoke in a voice that carried both music and sadness. "Illyra." The name lingered in the air like a secret shared. Illyra did not step nearer, but she did not vanish either. Her gaze drifted toward the gifts on the table. Her hand lifted slowly, fingers brushing the carved bird. She seemed surprised at its texture, as though she had not touched anything living in many years. "You bring these for me?" she asked. "Yes," Miran said gently. "I want to share pieces of my world with you. You've been watching me, haven't you?" Her glowing eyes flickered, almost as if embarrassed. "Yes. I watched because I had to. This library has been hidden for so long. I thought no human would ever find it again." Miran tilted his head. "And now that I've found it? Do you wish me to leave?" There was a long silence. Illyra's lips curved faintly, Not quite a smile, more like a memory of one. No, she whispered at last. It has been too quiet. Too empty. You may stay. Miran felt warmth bloom in his chest. He nodded with gratitude, then sat back down at the stone table. He opened his notebook, dipped a pen into ink, and began to write. His words were simple lines of poetry about stars, rivers, and hope. Illyra stayed near the shadows, listening. As time passed, she spoke more. At first, only short words. She asked about the flowers he brought, about the songs he hummed under his breath. Slowly, her curiosity grew, and with it, her voice became steadier. Though she never stepped fully into the light, Miran felt a bond forming. He realized that Illyra was not simply a watcher bound to the library, she was lonely, holding centuries of silence within her. And he, by coming here, had begun to break that silence. That night, when Miran finally rose to leave, Illyra's voice followed him softly. Will you come again? He turned at the stairway, smiling warmly. Yes, Illyra. Tomorrow, and the day after. As long as you allow it. Her glowing eyes watched him until he disappeared into the stairwell. And for the first time in many ages, the shadowed library felt less like a prison and more like a home. The library grew less silent with each visit. Where once Miran's voice had echoed alone, now there was Illyra's soft reply, careful and curious. At first, their talks were small about the gifts he brought, the sound of rain above the stone walls, or the poems he wrote in his notebook. But with time, their conversations began to deepen. One evening, Miran found Illyra sitting at the stone table when he arrived. She was not fully in the light, but she no longer hid entirely among the shelves. Her silver hair shimmered faintly, and her glowing eyes rested on a scroll she had unrolled across the table. You came early, Miran said with a gentle smile. Illyra lifted her gaze. I wished to read before you arrived. She hesitated, then added, would you like to see what is written here? Miran stepped closer, careful not to startle her. He leaned over the scroll. The symbols glowed faintly, curling across the page like tiny rivers of light. I don't know this language, he admitted. Illyra's voice softened. It is the language of my people. These are records of journeys across the stars. My ancestors traveled far, collecting stories, knowledge, and art from many worlds. This library was built as a place to keep them safe. Miran's eyes widened as he traced the glowing lines with his finger, though he could not read them. So this library, it is not only human. Illyra shook her head slowly. No. It is older than your people's first cities. Many races contributed to it. My duty was to guard it, to keep it hidden until someone worthy entered. Her words carried a weight that Miran could feel, though he did not yet understand all of it. He studied her face. And you have been here all this time. She looked away, her silver hair falling like a curtain. Yes. Centuries have passed while I remained here. Time moves differently within these walls, but even so, it has been long. Miran felt a pang in his chest. He could imagine the silence pressing in year after year, the endless duty without a voice to share it with. That must have been lonely, he said softly. Illyra's glowing eyes returned to him, filled with something like surprise. Lonely, she repeated the word, tasting it as though it were new. Yes. I had almost forgotten what that meant. Miran gave a small smile. Then maybe I remind you. For the first time, a faint laugh escaped her lips. It was soft, fragile, but it carried warmth. She touched the scroll gently. You remind me of more than that. You remind me that stories are meant to be shared, not only kept. Over the days that followed, Illyra began to show him more. She led him through narrow halls where shelves climbed higher than his eyes could follow. She pointed out crystals that contained living memories, visions of alien landscapes, voices of forgotten poets, songs sung by beings whose shapes were like fire. Each time Miran saw something new, he shared something of his own. He told her about human festivals, about rivers that shone with lanterns at night, about children laughing while chasing fireflies. He showed her sketches he had drawn of hills and trees from his childhood home. Illyra listened with wonder. Your people, you create beauty even from small things. A paper folded into a star, a song hummed while walking. We did not understand this. We collected great works, but we did not treasure the simple. Miran nodded. Sometimes, the simple things carry the deepest meaning. A carved bird, a handwritten note, a smile. They stay in the heart longer than monuments. Her eyes softened as she studied him. Perhaps this is why the library opened to you. Not for knowledge, but for your heart. Miran felt warmth rise in his chest. He looked around at the towering shelves, then back at her. Illyra, do you wish to leave this place? The question startled her. She stepped back slightly, her silver robes whispering across the floor. I cannot. My vow binds me. Until one worthy arrives, I am part of this library. But what if you have already fulfilled your duty? Miran asked gently. Maybe the library waited not for a scholar, but for someone to remind it and you that knowledge means nothing without love and life. Illyra fell silent. Her eyes shone brighter, though whether from sadness or hope, Miran could not tell. At last, she whispered, I do not know if I can leave. But when I speak with you, I feel lighter. As though the chains are not as strong as they once were. Miran reached into his bag and placed a simple candle on the table. He lit it, its flame flickering warmly beside the cold glow of the crystals. Then let us read together. Light for light. Illyra's gaze softened. She lowered herself onto the opposite side of the table. For the first time, they sat as companions, not just as guest and guardian. The shadows of the library seemed to draw back, making space for their voices. That night, when Miran left, Illyra did not retreat into the dark. She stood near the stairway, watching until his lantern disappeared. And as silence settled once more, she found herself whispering his name, as though holding it close could keep the loneliness away. The days passed like chapters in a story neither Miran nor Illyra had expected to write together. The library, once heavy with silence, now seemed alive with quiet warmth. Where once Illyra hid in shadows, she now spent long hours at the stone table, waiting for Miran to arrive. Each meeting added a new layer to their bond. Miran brought human things to share, songs softly sung, drawings of rivers and mountains, poems scribbled in his notebook. Illyra, in turn, revealed the treasures of her world. She unrolled star maps glowing with threads of silver light and taught him symbols from her ancient tongue. One evening, Miran hummed a gentle tune as he sketched a tree in his notebook. The branches stretched wide, and tiny birds rested upon them. Illyra leaned closer, fascinated. What is this song? She asked, tilting her head. It's an old lullaby, Miran explained. Mothers sing it to children so they can fall asleep without fear. Illyra closed her eyes, listening. The sound is simple, but it feels safe. My people did not sing. We stored songs here in crystals, but we never made them with our own voices. Miran looked at her with quiet surprise. You mean you've never sung? She shook her head slowly. Not once. He hesitated, then smiled gently. Then sing with me. You don't have to be perfect. Just follow the sound. At first, Illyra's voice was barely more than a whisper, trembling like a candle flame. But as Miran's steady tune filled the air, her voice grew stronger, weaving softly with his. The two voices blended, fragile yet beautiful, carrying through the shelves. When they finished, Illyra's glowing eyes widened slightly. I felt something, as though the sound touched not only the air, but my heart. Miran nodded. That's what songs do. They connect us. From that day, their sharing grew deeper. Illyra taught him how to read a few of her people's words. She showed him a phrase that meant soul light. When he asked what it meant, she explained, it is the spark inside us, the part that longs and hopes. Some say it is what makes love possible. Miran traced the symbol carefully onto a page. In our language, we call it heart. Illyra's lips curved in a soft smile. Different word, same truth. They began speaking of simple human joys. Miran described children chasing fireflies on warm nights, families gathering around a table for meals, and lovers writing letters to each other. Illyra listened with shining eyes. Your people treasure such small moments. That is something powerful. In return, she showed him ancient stories preserved in glowing orbs. One told of a world made of crystal mountains that sang in the wind. Another told of travelers who crossed galaxies to record beauty wherever they found it. Yet, as Illyra explained, her people never stayed to enjoy what they recorded. We always moved on, always gathering, but never living in the joy of it. Miran's voice was soft. Perhaps that's why you feel so alone here. You've guarded knowledge, but no one shared it with you. Knowledge is heavy when it is carried alone. Illyra lowered her gaze. You are right. For so long, I thought my vow was enough. But now, when you sit here, when you speak, I realize how empty silence truly was. Miran reached across the table, not to touch her hand, but to place his notebook between them. Then let's fill the silence together. We can write our own stories here. Her fingers brushed the edge of the notebook, and a quiet warmth spread through her. She did not say the words, but in her heart, she felt gratitude stronger than any duty. Yet, a shadow of worry lingered. One evening, as Miran prepared to leave, Illyra's voice stopped him. You cannot stay here forever. You are human. Your life is outside these walls. I cannot step beyond them. Miran paused, lantern in hand. He looked back at her, his eyes steady. Even if I cannot stay forever, every moment here matters. And if I cannot bring you out yet, then I will bring the world in. Illyra's heart stirred at his words. She had lived countless years without change, and now this one human had shifted her world simply by caring. That night, when Miran left, Illyra stood alone in the domed chamber. She touched the carved bird he had given her and whispered, almost to herself, perhaps hearts speak a language even libraries cannot bind. The library had grown gentler since Miran first stepped inside it. The silence no longer pressed like a heavy cloak. Now it carried whispers of life, his voice, Illyra's laughter, the soft hum of pages turning. Yet deep within the walls, something else began to stir. One evening, as Miran and Illyra sat together at the stone table, the crystals overhead glowed brighter than ever before. Their light pulsed slowly, almost like the beating of a heart. The shelves seemed to tremble, and a soft wind swept through the chamber though no door was open. Miran set down his notebook, startled. What is happening? Illyra's eyes widened with recognition. The library, it has awakened. It senses something within you. The glow spread across the walls, flowing like rivers of light between the shelves. The air filled with a deep, resonant sound, neither voice nor music, yet carrying meaning. Miran felt the sound enter his chest, reaching deeper than words could go. It is the test, Illyra whispered, her voice trembling. The library wishes to know if you are truly worthy. Miran swallowed hard. What does it want from me? Illyra shook her head. Not strength. Not knowledge. The test is different for each who faces it. It looks into the heart. The glow around them thickened, forming images in the air. Miran saw visions unfolding, scrolls filled with secrets of power, books that could give him endless wisdom, crystals holding the voices of long-forgotten kings. A quiet voice, not spoken but felt, seemed to ask, "What will you take?" Miran's heart raced. He could feel the pull of the treasures before him, answers to every question, knowledge that could make him greater than any human alive. But when he looked at Illyra, sitting silently with her silver hair glowing in the crystal light, he knew his choice. I do not want power, Miran said firmly. His voice shook but did not break. I do not want to be greater than others. What I want is simple, I want Illyra to be free. She has given her life to this place. If I am worthy, then let my worth be for her. The visions flickered, shifting. The treasures dissolved into mist, leaving only Illyra's face before him. Her eyes were wide, shining with both wonder and fear. Miran, she whispered, her voice breaking. You would give up all of this for me? Yes, he said without hesitation. What use is knowledge, if it is locked away in sorrow? What meaning is there in stories, if no one can live them? I choose you, Illyra. Always. The chamber grew still. Then, slowly, the crystals flared with a golden light, brighter than ever before. The deep sound swelled, filling the library with warmth. The test had heard his words and accepted them. Illyra pressed a hand to her chest as if steadying her heart. Her chains, unseen but deeply felt, trembled. For the first time in centuries, she felt them loosen. The vow that had bound her so tightly began to weaken. Yet fear touched her voice. I do not know if I can step beyond these walls. My duty has been my whole existence. Miran reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Then let me remind you of what exists beyond. The sky filled with stars. Rivers that sing with the wind. People who laugh and weep and dream together. You deserve to see all of it not as a watcher, but as someone who belongs. Tears glimmered in Illyra's glowing eyes, though they did not fall. She looked at him as though seeing something she had long forgotten: hope. Your people's strength, it is not in your power or your knowledge. It is in your hearts. That is why the library listens to you. The golden light slowly faded back to the soft glow of crystals. The test was complete, but its meaning remained in both of their hearts. That night, Miran rose to leave as he always did. At the stairway, he turned back and said gently, Illyra, you are not alone anymore. Remember that. Tomorrow, we will see how far your chains have broken. She stood silently, her silver hair shimmering in the glow, her hand still resting over her heart. As his lantern disappeared into the stairwell, she whispered his name into the quiet, and for the first time in centuries, the silence did not feel heavy, it felt full of promise. Illyra could not sleep. Not that sleep was truly needed within the library, but she often rested in long stillness. That night, however, her heart beat too quickly, and her thoughts moved like restless winds. The test had changed something. She could feel it in the air around her, in the shelves, in the crystals above. More than that, she felt it within herself. The vow that had bound her for centuries no longer pressed as tightly. Its weight had softened, like frost melting under sunlight. She touched the carved bird Miran had given her, tracing its wooden wings. "You chose me," she whispered into the silence. The words filled her with warmth, yet also with fear. Could she truly leave? Or had she grown too used to shadows? The next evening, Miran arrived as promised. His lantern's glow reached the domed chamber, and his eyes immediately sought her out. Illyra was already at the table, the carved bird resting in front of her. "You look different tonight," Miran said gently as he set down his bag. Illyra tilted her head. "How so?" "There's light in your eyes," he replied with a smile. "Like you're closer to freedom." She lowered her gaze. "Perhaps. But freedom feels frightening. All my years have been spent here, bound to these walls. If I leave, who will I be?" Miran sat across from her, placing his notebook between them as always. "You will still be Illyra. Only without chains. And I will be here, to walk beside you." His steady tone calmed her, but doubt lingered. "What if I cannot take that step? What if the vow is stronger than me?" Miran leaned forward slightly. "Then let your heart be stronger. My people believe love gives courage. It doesn't erase fear, it helps us walk through it." The words sank deep, reaching places she had long buried. For centuries, she had been guardian, watcher, prisoner. Now someone spoke to her not as a duty, but as a person. Illyra rose slowly from her seat. The air around her shimmered faintly as though the vow itself stirred in protest. She walked toward the center of the chamber, where the ceiling's faded stars stretched high above. "If I am to break these chains, I must choose it myself." Miran stood as well, keeping his distance but offering his steady presence. "Then choose. Not for the library. Not for the vow. Choose for you." Her breath trembled. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in centuries, she let herself imagine the outside world. She imagined the feel of wind across her face, the sight of true stars above her head, the sound of voices laughing freely. And in all of those visions, she imagined Miran beside her. The crystals brightened as her heart filled with longing. The vow, sensing her choice, began to crack. A faint sound like glass breaking echoed across the chamber. The chains, invisible but ever present, trembled. Illyra gasped softly. "It is happening," Miran's voice was firm but kind. "Don't stop. You are stronger than the silence that held you." Tears shimmered in her glowing eyes. She lifted her hands, pressing them to her chest. I choose life. I choose freedom. I choose to walk beyond these shadows." With those words, the air rippled. A great flash of light spread through the library, washing over the shelves, the walls, the ceiling painted with stars. For a moment, it felt as though the library itself sighed in relief. Then the glow settled. Illyra stood tall, breathing heavily, her silver hair lifting slightly in the lingering energy. The vow was gone. The chains were broken. She looked at Miran, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. "I am free." Miran's smile was wide and full of warmth. "Yes, Illyra. You are free. For the first time, she stepped forward without hesitation, closing the distance between them. She stopped only a breath away, her eyes meeting his. I do not know what waits beyond these walls. But I wish to see it with you. Miran nodded. Then tomorrow, we leave together. The thought filled her with both fear and joy, but she did not retreat. Instead, she allowed herself a small, true smile. The library would always remain, but it was no longer her prison. It was now only a place of memory, a place where her story had begun again. That night, as Miran left, Illyra walked with him all the way to the stairway. For the first time, she did not stop at the edge of the chamber. She watched him climb until the glow of his lantern disappeared, and the silence that followed did not weigh her down. She looked up at the painted stars above and whispered, "Tomorrow, I will see the real ones." Morning came softly in the ancient library. Light from the hidden crystals touched every shelf, but Illyra no longer felt trapped by it. For the first time in centuries, she waited at the base of the stairway, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. When Miran's footsteps echoed above, she lifted her gaze. He appeared with his lantern, but today he carried more than books and papers. A small bag was slung over his shoulder, filled with food and cloth, prepared for their journey. "You are ready," Miran said as he reached her side. Illyra touched her chest lightly, where the vow once weighed her down. "The chains are gone. I can leave." His eyes softened. "Then let's walk together." They began to climb the stairway, stone worn smooth by time. Each step felt like a test to Illyra. The vow no longer pulled her back, but habit whispered in her mind, "You belong to the shadows." Still, she moved forward, guided by Miran's steady presence. At last, they reached a great iron door, hidden at the top of the stair. Illyra placed her hand against it. The surface was cold, but no unseen force stopped her. She glanced at Miran, who gave a quiet nod. With a deep breath, she pushed. The door groaned, and after centuries of silence, it slowly swung open. A rush of air met her face, fresh, alive, filled with scents she had never known. Grass, damp earth, blossoms carried by the wind. Illyra stepped back slightly, her eyes wide. So many smells, so much life. Miran smiled, watching her wonder. This is only the beginning. They stepped out together. For Illyra, it was like entering another world. The sky stretched endlessly above, painted in shades of blue she had never seen. True sunlight warmed her skin, not the pale glow of crystals. Birds circled in the distance, their calls sharp and free. Illyra tilted her face upward, tears gathering in her eyes. The sky, it feels endless. No ceiling, no walls. Miran stood beside her, quietly letting her take it in. He knew this was her first moment of true freedom, and it belonged to her more than anyone else. They walked into a meadow that stretched beyond the library's hidden entrance. Wildflowers dotted the field, their colors bright and soft. Illyra bent to touch a blossom, her fingers trembling. "It is real. Everything is real." She laughed softly, and the sound surprised even her. "I had forgotten I could laugh." Miran's chest warmed at the sound. "It suits you." They wandered further, each step leading Illyra into new wonders: rustling leaves, the hum of bees, the cool brush of wind against her hair. Each detail was a gift, a piece of life she had been denied for centuries. After some time, they reached a small hill. From its top, the horizon stretched wide, showing forests, rivers, and distant mountains. Illyra stood silently, overwhelmed by the vastness. "I feel so small," she whispered. Miran placed a hand gently over hers. "That's the beauty of it. We are small, but together, we can still leave our mark." Illyra looked at him, her silver eyes shining. "You gave me this chance. Without you, I would still be bound." "I only reminded you of your strength," Miran replied softly. "You freed yourself." A silence settled between them, but it was not heavy. It was warm, filled with unspoken truth. Illyra felt her heart steady, stronger than it had ever been. She turned fully toward Miran. "I want to walk this world," she said, her voice firm though gentle. "Not as a prisoner, not as a forgotten guardian, but as Illyra. And I want you beside me, if you choose." Miran's answer was simple and sure. "I choose you." Her smile deepened, a smile touched with centuries of longing now turned to hope. For the first time, she felt she truly belonged not to walls or vows, but to the living world, and to the bond they shared. As the sun moved higher, they began walking again, leaving the shadowed library behind. Illyra did not look back. The library had been her prison, but it had also given her Miran. It would remain as memory, but her future lay under open skies. Together, they walked toward the unknown, hearts steady, steps light. Each moment was new, each sight a wonder. The shadows no longer claimed her. The vow no longer bound her. Illyra was free. And beside her, Miran carried not just books or knowledge, but the promise of companionship, trust, and something greater than either of them had imagined, love born in the shadowed library, now blooming under endless skies.